Watchers in the Fourth Dimension.
And he said, beautiful mushrooms will blossom and burst.
It is a question of synaptic adhesion.
That's the way these military minds work.
Hello and welcome back to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension. I'm Anthony.
I'm Julie.
And I'm Riley, and your silliness is noted.
This episode, it's the final part of the Key to Time saga as we tackle the Armageddon Factor. But before we get into that, Julie's going to take a look at the mail. Over to you, Julie.
All of our mail today is going to be on the Stones of Blood. Our first one from Nick Rutherford, one of my favorites. With you 100%, Julie. One of my all-time favorites, too. Coincidentally, I saw Susan Engel about 10 years later in King John at the Barbican, and there was no scenery chewing there. Give me this over Shakespeare any day. I visited the location, the Rollright Stones in Oxfordshire, nearly 30 years ago, a very tranquil place. Yes, my friend Phil, who is a regular listener but yet to comment, has given permission for me to tell you that listening to you today inspired him to watch the story again. That's my favorite.
Love that.
I love when people do that. Friend Keith Burton says, as you realized when watching the serial, writer David Fisher is exceptionally good at dialogue and at world building. Can confirm. He will demonstrate this again in its subsequent scripts, Androids of Tara, The Creature from the Pit, and The Leisure Hive. His novelizations of the latter two stories deep dive into the history of each planet. And before his death, he penned an audiobook for the Stones of Blood, which gives us lots more backstory on the Keliak. The book is read by Anthony's favorite statuesque silver dominatrix, Susan Engel.
Yes.
As you would imagine, she is a wonderful narrator for the audiobook. You're welcome, Anthony. Go listen to that, apparently. All right. Our friend Alan Seiler says, I don't have the command over English language necessary to describe how much I love the story, and it was truly a delight hearing how much you all enjoyed this one. Everything about it sings. The pacing, the concept, the design, the score, the performances, the dialogue, especially the dialogue, and the relationship between the Doctor and Romana, which continues to be a joy. It's my go-to Halloween viewing. So much attention to detail, such as the thing at the end about the number of stones having changed, as they're indeed a very old legend about not being able to correctly count the roll rights. And it almost goes without mentioning, but I'm going to do it anyway, that Amelia Rumford is one of the greatest characters in the entire 61 history of Doctor Who.
Yes.
Wow.
Hey, Julie, very quickly, before you move on from Alan's mail, I want to very quickly regale a story that Alan told me in person when we had dinner a couple of weeks ago about having Mary Tam at Timegate, which later became Wholanta. And he told me he didn't put this in our comments because he didn't want to have two comments competing in the mail. So I'm just going to tell you about this one. Apparently, during a panel, someone had asked her about the kind of sapphic vibes that I pointed out, and she kind of dismissed it and said, oh, no, I don't think that was there at all. And then later they did a live commentary for it, and she was like, oh, yeah, that actually is a bit sapphic, isn't it? I thought that was really funny when Alan told me, so just wanted to get that in there.
Dear listener, if you want to have dinner with Anthony, support our Patreon and get up to our Watchers in the Fourth Dimension gold level donations, and you'll be able to also have dinner with Anthony.
No, I'll have dinner with anyone.
All right. Our friend Jamie Carlson says, the trope of seeing a portrait of someone's ancestors and realizing that it's actually that person and they're a vampire might be a reference to Carmilla, an 1872 pre-Dracula novel about a lesbian vampire. Yes, I've read it as well. Also, Doctor Who alum Ingrid Pitt played Carmilla in one movie adaptation.
I bet she did.
Hey, Riley, if we need an idea for something to watch for Halloween special, maybe look into that.
There are several Ingrid Pitt films available to us.
I'm wondering if Moffat likes this one as well, as RTD, The Exchange, Are You From Outer Space? No, I'm from Inner Time, sort of echoes, Are You From Space? No, nobody's from space, I'm from a planet. Okay. And I have to imagine that at some point, Amelia Rumford and Ruth cited each other's papers. You know, probably. 9.5 out of 10 in practical shoes. Thank you. Our friend John Thomas Casey I've always liked this one too. I have to fight with it in my head sometimes because I do usually prefer when the gothic trappings are taken seriously. And as Riley in particular pointed out often in this Watchers episode, they really aren't there. But it's charismatic and fun, and everybody seems to have a great time. Amelia Rumford is wonderful, and I really like Vivian Faye too. Although one thing I've always wanted more of the story is, well, more Vivian and more about the friendship between the two ladies. That would be actually fun.
Friendship.
Okay. And then still maybe not an absolute masterpiece for me, but I'm really happy you all had such a good time. I'd give it 7.5 out of 10, maybe, but that's still pretty awesome. Okay, I want actual metrics. Come on. For anyone who doesn't give an actual true metric, remember. All right. David Gorton says, curious one this. The first 2 episodes are excellent. Then it seems to lose its way a bit once we get to the spaceship. Someone who doesn't agree. That half is without merit, but there's just something about it which just doesn't work for me. The Megara are an interesting concept and well realized. Interesting you like them, but you just don't like it in this story. Agree that Professor Rumford is wonderful, and I wonder if she was the inspiration for Evelyn Smith in the Big Finish stories. I have no idea.
Possible.
There is enough here for this to be given a strong score, though, so just about 8 policeman's truncheons out of 10. I really like that metric. Friend David Patty says, very amused by the Stones of Blood podcast. I used to be very sniffy about this period, thought it was too silly and not overly scary enough, but now I know I wasn't giving the stories their due. This season and next season are just plain fun. And okay, I wouldn't put this as high as Rebos, but it's enjoyably bonkers. And the season's consistent, so even when Stones of Blood shoots off in a different direction at the end, it still feels connected to the rest of the story. Rumford is wonderful. Up there with Miss Hawthorne and Amelia Ducat, the thought occurs now that the 3 of them could have made a great Charlie's Angels style spinoff.
Oh my gosh, yes please. Someone write that fanfiction.
8, excuse me while I whip out my wigs, out of 10. All right.
Brilliant.
James Cannon says, just realized you've got a Facebook page.
Yes.
We do. I've been listening to your podcast since the beginning and really enjoy it, even if I don't always agree with your decisions. Season 15. Sad emoji. By far the best Doctor Who podcast available, in my opinion.
Aww.
They love us. You're now deep in the era of Doctor Who I watched as a child. My earliest memory is of Invasion of the Dinosaurs.
Nice.
Love me Invasions of the Dinosaurs. The Stones of Blood really was a throwback to Hinchcliffe. It was the last Doctor Who story I found scary. The camper scene was the most disturbing moment. I remember it was, I think, a pastiche to those moments in horror novels, like James Herbert, where innocent people get chomped by the monster. Looking forward to your response to Season 16, my guilty pleasure.
I don't think there's any guilty pleasure to Season 16. It's just good.
It's good. It is. Harry Hussey says, I was delighted to hear that you all loved Stones of Blood, and it made for a fun podcast about a story that I myself am very fond of. One thing that came to mind concerning the various character names is the Ogre, which may have been a nod to the Ogham stones. And as you can see, the Ogham is technically the written language, but it was written on standing stones, given that David Fisher had an interest in standing stones, and judging by the story, Celtic mythology, he may well have been aware of this stuff too.
I think that's likely.
Yeah, I like that one. And then our good friend, Bill Lamont, does say, I love the serial and wish my recall were better. I think I remember one wonderful old rural village woman. Yes, you're remembering correctly, Bill. And I remember the moving styrofoam stones as being very effective. They were. I generally get the humor, but I think I'm always looking for an opportunity to give my mind a rest, so I don't think I picked up that the show is making fun of itself in the serial. So thanks for pointing that out to me. I always get a lot from your episodes.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
And then last but not least, from Adam Wright, I was waiting for Julie to enjoy this one. Yes, Stones of Blood is a great classic story with a strong female cast. Professor Amelia is such a great standout. Nothing more to say that y'all haven't 10 out of 10 mechanical dogs that are all the rage in Trenton, New Jersey.
Nice.
And that, my friends, is the mail.
Thank you for that, Julie. And as a reminder to our listeners, we really do love getting your feedback, thoughts, comments, and questions, and we do try to read out as much as possible on the show. So please do get in touch with us. You can contact us through Facebook, Instagram, and the platform formerly known as Twitter at Watchers4D, or you can email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. And while I'm asking you to do things, we would love it if you're not already subscribed, if you could go ahead and subscribe to us, and if you dropped us a review or rating on your podcast platform of choice. Anyway, let's head on to the behind the scenes for the Armageddon Factor. When producer Graham Williams and script editor Anthony Reed decided to develop a season-long story arc, they recognized that this would complicate the year's planning process. So they placed the climactic serial in what they considered experienced hands and approached Bob Baker and Dave Martin, the Bristol boys, to develop an appropriate conclusion. Quite why they thought that the writers of The Invisible Enemy and Underworld were appropriate for this, who the fuck knows? Anyway, they basically gave them free rein as long as they ensured that the whole thing was wrapped up and the key to time did not spill over into the next season. So, the Bristol boys took inspiration from the ongoing Cold War of the time and developed a storyline initially entitled simply Armageddon. Obviously, this later became the Armageddon Factor. In this original version of the story, both Atrios and Zeos were populated planets. The conflict between them stemmed from a catastrophic shift in the orbits of both worlds, for which each blamed the other. They were being egged on by the Shadow, who was known as the Presence on Atrios, and the Voice on Zeos. The Doctor helped Merak search for an astrophysicist named Romana, who had gone missing years earlier, and it transpired that she had discovered the Shadow's planet lying between the two warring worlds. An elderly Zeon named Asgard provided clues to Rayna's whereabouts. The Doctor was then forced to use a jerry-rigged key to time to keep both planets' armies frozen in time. And the Shadow's own Shadow was going to turn out to be the sixth segment. And the Shadow's plan was to use its powers to pit one half of the universe against the other, and then the Doctor would ultimately stop the Shadow by unfreezing the two armies and then giving each the coordinates of the Shadow's castle of evil. Yeah, I mean, it's the Bristol boys, you know?
Yep.
The Bristol boys were also keen to bring in the character of Drax, who they had created for the original unused version of Season 14's The Hand of Fear. Back then, they thought of having him as kind of an elderly, eccentric character, but for this, they reimagined him more in the mold of a South London used car salesman. Bonkers. The scripts were formally commissioned at the end of January 1978, with some changes obviously being made. To avoid confusion with Prince Reynard from the same season's The Androids of Tara, Rayna became Astra. She was now a princess, and it would be her and not the Shadow's Shadow who would be revealed as the sixth segment. And, of course, if you think back, the notion of one of the segments being a person had previously been suggested by Douglas Adams when he was originally thinking about ideas on how to incorporate the key into his story. At the end of summer 1978, Baker and Martin decided to bring an end to their writing partnership. No more Bristol boys. Armageddon would become Dave Martin's final contribution to Doctor Who, although Bob Baker will go on to contribute one more set of scripts for next season. However, the end of this partnership meant that rewrites mostly fell on script editor Anthony Reed's shoulders. One major concern that he had was the potential production cost of Armageddon.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. And to this end, he decided that he was going to eliminate the Zeons altogether, so Zeos was going to be entirely run by the computer Mentalis. Reed and Graham Williams also played up Drax's comical nature, making him even more of a Cockney shyster. And it was agreed that Baker and Martin would leave the climax to the storyline to Williams, but he was still influenced by their ideas. So they had this idea that the Doctor would come to mistrust both of the Guardians. And there was some discussion about the possibility of the two Guardians being different aspects of the same entity. By the middle of October 1978, Anthony Reed was being trailed by Douglas Adams, who was preparing to take over the script editor's role for season 17. It was Adams who changed the name of the story to The Armageddon Factor, and he worked with Williams to revise the story's conclusion by adding the Doctor's confrontation with the Black Guardian. And as this was originally written, the Doctor simply decided that he didn't want anyone controlling the key to time, and so the Doctor just dispersed the 6 segments because he could. Let's talk about the assembly of our behind-the-scenes team. As director, we have Michael Hayes, who we previously saw directing The Androids of Tara earlier in the season. We have the returning contributions of John Nathan Turner as production unit manager and Dudley Simpson with incidental music. As designer, we have the first contribution of Richard McMahon Smith, whose other credits include the Z-Cars spin-off Softly Softly Task Force and Only Fools and Horses. And as costumer, we have the final contribution of Michael Birdle, who had previously worked on Season 8's Colony in Space. During rehearsals, the show's casting issues started to come to a head. Tom Baker had already threatened to quit while they were making the previous story, but he was eventually prepared to rescind his resignation pending further discussions. So at this point, Mary Tam became more of a concern. Williams was very keen to keep her, but she felt that the production team had let Romana degenerate into just another screaming companion. Williams even told her that he might be willing to fire Tom Baker if it would keep her on the show.
Whoa.
But she still wouldn't commit. Graham Williams, being Graham Williams, decided to proceed as if she was definitely staying on the show, just as he had the previous season with Louise Jameson. However, she was leaning towards leaving, and she started suggesting that Princess Astra actress Lala Ward would be a good replacement for a new incarnation of Romana, but more on that next season. While the question of Romana was ongoing, Williams was still trying to handle the Tom Baker situation. He had offered Baker a new contract, and Tom just left it on the table. After a few weeks, Williams gave Baker's agent an ultimatum, and as a result, Baker wrote to BBC head of serials Graham MacDonald to reinstate his resignation and complain about his treatment by Williams. The producer, in turn, informed MacDonald that he would quit if Baker's demands were met. Graham MacDonald decided that he was going to hold a meeting with both Tom Baker and Graham Williams to try and clear the air. Williams held his ground, and Baker apparently realized that his shenanigans had gone too far. And following that, Baker finally signed a contract on January the 18th, 1979, having been granted none of his demands for control over scripts, directors, or casting. That's how you do it, guys. Good on you, Graham Williams. Back to the Armageddon Factor. As all of that nonsense was going on during both rehearsals and filming, the final story was broadcast on consecutive Saturdays as usual between January the 20th and February the 24th, 1979. And before we go ahead and discuss the story, the short summary is with Julie this episode.
Would I say this is in my top 10 stories? Absolutely not. Would I say it's in my top 50? Yeah, still not. We get the stereotypical military leader obsessed with winning at all costs, his unquestioning lackey, a princess who becomes a damsel in distress, and my absolute favorite, mind control. The story reveals its cards too early. What is off with Zeos? What could possibly be this blank space between the two planets? And why does it seem that the tracer is drawn to Princess Astra? Who knows? K9 somehow becomes more of a damsel in distress than Romana until the very end, and for some reason we decide to have a shrink ray gun that adds very little to the story. And in the end, we decide to scatter the pieces of the key to time yet again. So what did we actually accomplish this season?
Yeah.
Took the words right out of my mouth there with that one. I think we're seeing eye to eye on this.
Let's talk about this so that we can get to that.
And done.
Are you going to try to change my mind, Anthony?
No. Let's talk about the story so we can get to the general criticism of the way this ended the whole storyline.
Okay.
Not going to try and change your mind, Julie. I think all three of us agree.
I love this opening, though, with it showing this TV novella type thing that's going on, and the romantic music is so gorgeous. Thank you, Dudley Simpson. You were doing so well.
It's like it's meant to be a deliberately bad propaganda version of, I don't know, Casablanca or Brief Encounter or something. It's brilliant.
I know this ties in more towards the end, but with that opening and then them going into this relationship between Astra and Merak, I really wanted them to then do the same type of scene with the two of them, and they didn't. That would have been a great parallel, and you chose not to do it, so why did you open it the way that you did?
It really is a shame because I feel like there is something that's building with that, like a subtext that we're going to see, and it's fine for it to just be there for world building. I appreciate it, but I was hoping there'd be a little bit more to it. It didn't have to be the entire core of the story, just need a little bit more there. And it just seems like what was promising with like, well, that's an interesting thing to show. We then just go kind of on autopilot for the rest of the plot.
I actually really like the whole way that's handled by the director because it's deliberately bad CSO, deliberately bad acting, but it's in color and you're watching it thinking, oh God, what are we about to watch? Is the whole story going to be like this? Then we cut to the TARDIS. So we move away from that. And by the time we go back to Atrios, it's in black and white. The camera kind of pans out and you see it's on the TV. And you're in this grim and grimy hospital. The ceiling's falling in. There's clearly a war going on. I think the way that was filmed was really good.
I don't disagree. Yeah, you're right.
I think, and I'm going to tip my cards a little, I think this entire thing was pretty well directed. It's a shame that Michael Hayes had to work with these scripts.
That's fair.
This Marshall guy. I'm so tired of this kind of character.
Yeah.
And honestly, I was kind of mad. So I get that they still went through the whole, like, him talking into this mirror thing and all that kind of stuff. Like, that was all explained. I just hated the explanation.
Yeah.
He kept on, like, reaching towards his neck and doing all this stuff. And I was like, ooh, is he an alien in a mask? I want to see. And no, that's not what it was.
It's Julie's least favorite trope. Mind control.
I was so mad. But we'll get there when we get there.
While we're on the subject of the Marshal, I just have to point out that I really was amused with his uniform. Usually military uniforms would have some sort of regalness to it or some order, something that's toned down. This looked like something that you would wear like in a disco music video. I mean, it was just like glaring and bright, and it just really amused me.
Remember, in previous serials this season, we had sequins on military-esque type things, so I'm not terribly surprised that I continue to see that.
I think the problem is that the costume designers are thinking, okay, it's military, it needs to be high-tech, it needs to be futuristic. What can I do that looks futuristic but is also cheap? Sequins!
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind is 1978, when this was being made, 1979, disco is big.
Oh, yeah.
Saturday Night Fever came out in 78. While this was on air, Chic with Le Freak were at number 1 in the US. Sister Sledge released We Are Family. Disco is the thing. I'm not surprised to see the kind of disco elements creeping into the costumes.
And it's fine. It's really well for the Marshal because now his outfit is both for work and for play.
Yeah. Yeah.
After a shift on the little command bridge there, just run down to the discotheque.
I really hope his personality changes when he goes to the discotheque. Otherwise, again, no.
If any of our listeners are talented artists, we would dearly love to see some kind of illustration of the Marshal boogieing on down at the disco.
And while we're on the subject of costumes, we don't do this often, so I think we are allowed this one. Romana is absolutely smoking in that outfit. Yeah. My goodness.
I've been doing that all season with Romana, but yes.
I noticed in this part, and they did a lot of back and forth between the TARDIS and what's happening on the planet. That happened quite a bit, and I liked it in some ways, but it did get a little tiring until we finally got out of the TARDIS.
I actually really like the first couple of episodes of this, to be honest. I think it sets it up quite well. There's this nuclear war going on. You've got the whole Marshal versus Astra for the people's hearts and minds thing going on, and he's trying to outmaneuver her. He's a lot more Machiavellian than I remembered him being. And the whole thing about the children's hospital being moved to K-Block, again, as a kid, I didn't pick this up, but she knows exactly what's going on. She knows that she's going to her death in there. And then all of this is set up really well and then kind of drops off as the story goes on. And it's kind of disappointing because I actually like this a lot better than what we get in
the back
episodes
half.
5 and 6.
Yes.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. And I think it's another one of those cases where this shouldn't be a 6-parter.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's enough story to it to warrant it being a 6-parter.
I think part of the problem is, I guess there is, because there are like 3 different stories going on across this. I think what they should have done is pick one of them and done it well as a 4-parter.
Okay, I could see that as well. I do have to say, though, there is some exceptional dialogue. And the way that some of that dialogue is delivered, like one of them being, I have to attend to ... a matter of state. Okay, interesting way to pause there. And then the other one was, where's your optimism? It opted out. Just like very clever things there. And I really enjoy that and appreciate that in a Doctor Who story.
Yeah, and we've got the Doctor and Romana being accused of being spies once they land. They're accused of collaborating with Merak. I mean, it's all fairly standard tropes, but again, I think it works here. It's effective, particularly the way the Marshal then flip-flops with them in part 2. I actually really like it because it does suggest there's something weird going on here. So it takes that trope and it twists it. But anyway, end of part 1, K9 shows up, shoots the lights, our heroes escape with Merak. Astra's taken from K-Block by a mysterious hooded figure, and the TARDIS is gone. And that's our cliffhanger, and Julie's mad about the start of part 2 because it's a really long recap.
Yes. You know me so well, Anthony.
It's even in my notes. Fairly long recap, period. Julie will be mad, period.
Well, yes. I think one of my favorite things in the first part of this, the Doctor and Romana meet back up with Merak, right? Because they're all running around and he's announcing his love for Astra, and the Doctor and Romana just kind of look at each other. They're like, that's great. It's like, I don't know what's happening here, but all right.
It feels like with what was at the beginning with the soap opera, it felt like maybe there was an intention and it just kind of got removed from the script. Maybe the intention was, for the sake of humor, Astra and Merak were going to be the annoying star-crossed lovers, while the Doctor and Romana are actually trying to get things done and fix things, while all they do is just kind of float around like, oh no, oh I miss so-and-so. That would have been pretty funny if they used that for humor, but I feel like that may have just been lost in a script rewrite or something. From this part onwards, Merak just becomes fucking useless. The whole story.
100%.
He runs around calling for Astra, and that's basically all he does.
So I get why they made him like the surgeon, right? Because she goes there to help with all the people who are sick and the children and all that kind of stuff. Okay, great, fine. But in so many ways, I wish they had made him some other type of character. And honestly, I think that they could have made him more of someone who could like build things and have removed Drax completely. Because once we get to Drax, I will talk how much I hate Drax.
Wow, I'm kind of excited for that.
But we'll get there when we get there. Okay, sorry. I'm going to probably move a little bit ahead here. I want to talk about K9.
On the way to the furnace?
Before he even gets to the furnace. So first off, did he get like hypnotized or something? Because that seemed very odd. I have a question. If he is hypnotized, how does that work? Because he doesn't have brainwaves like a person. So when we get to part 5 in part 6, I have even more questions about that.
In this part, I would make an assumption that that thing that flashes at him, I have issues. Where did that come from? Why is there no indication of this technology existing at any other time, like with the flashing lights? But I would assume that's like some kind of computer signal that kind of scrambled him a little and lured him in. That's my assumption. I do think using the literal same device as used to control the humans later on is dumb.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyway.
K9 became a damsel in distress multiple times in this story, and that made me very upset. They didn't use K9 to his potential, and he's a lot more than what they made him to be. My poor dog was done dirty.
And I'm going to curse a lot this episode, so I apologize. But these are the fuckers who created K9.
Right? What is wrong with them? I was so upset.
I enjoyed K9 being put into peril. I thought it spiced up part 2. Particularly. Now, I'm not really a fan of the mind control thingy or the little neck doohickey in part 5, but I did enjoy the building tension of him on the little conveyor belt to the furnace. I thought that was a good part.
I could be okay with that aspect of it, but how he got lured into it was bad.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
It's really hard to watch him on the conveyor to the furnace.
And that's what makes it so good.
Yeah, and how horrified the Doctor is about the bestest boy is going to get recycled. The Doctor's so upset. It leads to some nice moments. But I agree with you, Julie. How he's lured, I can kind of make it make sense, but I don't particularly like it. There is still a lot in this episode that I do like. Everything going on with the Marshal, I kind of really love his flip-flopping on the Doctor because he's being controlled. When the Doctor's brought back to him and the Marshal turns around with this huge grin on his face, he's now incredibly nice. The Doctor's coming's been foretold. He is the one who will save Atrios. The whole personality shifts. And you kind of see he's still very vainglorious, and he's still talking about the mighty battle fleet of Atrios. And the Doctor's horror when he finds out that it's just 6 ships is incredible. There's this big personality with nothing to back it up. He's insane.
Speaking of him being insane, I found it very humorous how even Shap mentions it. The Marshal. Oh, he just stares at that mirror all the time.
Yeah.
Everyone's just comfortable with this? This is considered okay? Didn't Shap say something to the effect of, that's where he meditates and thinks about stuff like, that's not a good sign for a leader if they're doing that. And especially when the mirror is kind of warped, that makes it worse for some reason.
And this is the man who is leading your planet.
And then speaking of the underlying plot, I want to get everyone's opinion on this. Did everyone kind of see where this was going in regards to the so-called war? That it wasn't completely controlled by a computer. There was one side that was just a computer. This is very similar to a original Star Trek episode called A Taste of Armageddon. And then once I saw the little hints planted there, I'm like, okay. So either a computer is faking them out or that's the other side. But basically, this is not a standard war between two opposing peoples.
Yeah, I knew something fishy was going on, but I couldn't quite place exactly what it was because I was like, there's just no way. There's no way this is what all is happening, but I couldn't tell you exactly what was wrong. I didn't quite place just the computer bit of it, but I'm not as familiar with some of the sci-fi tropes as you guys are.
Riley, just talking about Star Trek, I did think there were some references to patterns of force as well, the kind of totalitarian nature of the planet, even if they weren't going full-on Nazi. There were kind of underlying vibes to it, particularly with the Marshal. I think there was a lot of Star Trek influence here. Also, what was interesting is when the Doctor is having the discussion with the Marshal in regards to strategy and what they need to do, and the Marshal's getting all excited. This is where they dive into the classic Cold War game theory element, which I wish was delved into a bit more. This was probably the most interesting part of the serial to me because this actually had something to say, but it was moved past very quickly. And I really enjoyed when the Doctor got the Marshal to basically lay out his logic, and then he gets to the point of saying that if he had an ultimate deterrent, he would have to use it to see if it worked. And it makes sense because that is kind of what goes on if you look at history. A lot of the strategies that were developed by think tanks during the Cold War time, they all unfortunately came to a conclusion that, luckily this didn't happen, but the conclusion was if you had something that was an ultimate weapon, you would have to show it. You would have to prove to everyone else that it was there because you didn't want anyone to call your bluff. But by using it, there would be problems. So I was very happy that they delved into that. I just wish that was more of a central theme, something they hung on throughout the serial. But instead, we move into a standard action pace of autopilot. Yeah, you calling out game theory is spot on, Riley. And there are the tropes of mutually assured destruction here as well. The Marshal even says, if I had a deterrent, I would use it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And just bringing up the Marshal again with the mirror, when they finally reveal that behind the mirror is a skull, was anyone thinking like, Image of the Findall, Part 2?
Oh, God.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, what is this skull thing? The skull means nothing.
No, it really doesn't mean
it
anything.
means nothing. So that's why I was upset. It's about the thing on the neck. It has nothing to do with this random... I don't know. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. All right. Are we close to the end of part 2?
I think so.
Yeah, so Astra broadcasts that Atrios calls for surrender. She's apparently a prisoner of war. The Doctor, Romana, and Merak all head towards the transmat, and the Doctor gets taken, flanked by 2 of the mutes. Romana says, oh no, K9, it was a trap! And that's our cliffhanger. And part 3 has a very short recap.
Yes!
So that's good.
The best of recaps. Romana does a basically, I'll explain later.
Yes, she does.
I'll explain it to you another time, is the phrase that she had. But I don't... I'm like reading through this and like all my notes, I'm like, none of this matters.
We've been criticizing a fair bit of the serial. I would like to bring up something that I did enjoy. I think the Shadow and the mutes look great. I really like that look. It's maybe a little too stereotypical evil, but I thought it looked cool. I was happy with it. And when Merak gives Romana the slip to go into the transmat, I specifically, because I was tired of the character and I wanted Romana to be more active, I immediately wrote in my notes, please kill Merak. He prevented Romana from being involved in the action. I want Romana involved in the story. Get this guy out of here, please.
Yeah, he steals the tracer, goes to Zeos to try and find Astrid. He's an absolute fucking tool this whole time.
Right. Surplus to requirements.
It's one of those things where I can appreciate a love story. Don't get me wrong. I'm a romantic at heart. But this is not that. He's like a whiny little puppy who is just running around like, and I'm like, well, then do something about it, you asshole.
Even the doctor eventually loses patience. There's one point where Merak asks, what are bees? And the doctor just kind of snaps him and goes, insects with stings in their tails. And it's like, yeah, we've all lost our patience with him, doctor. We get it.
So the doctor's with the shadow. And first off, the doctor just like calmly walks in and sits on that chair. I'm like, did you not think that something bad was going to happen? Because he's like, sits down, doors closed. Why did the doors close?
It's back to Bugs Bunny.
Yes. Come on, guys.
I really like that whole scene. I mean, the way the doctor just pulls the device off, he's just like, yep, nope, this isn't going to work on me.
Oh, that I liked. Yes.
And some of the dialogue here, you are not dealing with a fool, doctor. Oh, yes, I am. I actually really like that whole sequence. To me, this is probably the last good episode, maybe part 4.
As a whole for this serial, it was very helpful that we had a silly doctor and not a grumpy doctor. That could have made this a true slog.
Except when he's dealing with
Merak. And that's fine. That's understandable. We all feel you on that one, doctor.
I do find it interesting that the Shadows says another 1,000 years won't bother him. And I'm like, well, the doctor doesn't have a lot of patience, but he could technically wait another 1,000 years. But that's fine. It's accurate. And we flip back over. So they, leave the doctor there. And so then just like, well, I'm going to go explore a little more. That's what happens when you leave the doctor by himself. And so we get Merak again. I was like, is he going to make this worse? How is he going to make this worse? Because he's going to.
Come on, even Shap tells Merak to, quote, exercise a little more self-control. Yes, we're all feeling it. Calm down, Merak. You tool.
I want to talk about the scene when Romana comes in and then Shap, because I like this sequence. I think there's some good things. One, even though Merak did stupid things, Romana is like, I can still figure out how to make this happen, which she does with K9, so I'm happy with that. And then Shap, because Shap is Shap.
Shap is Shap.
Shap is Shap. He follows. First, he kind of sees the doctor, and the music that plays when the doctor is walking around while Shap is like hiding and kind of following him around, that music is gold. I absolutely enjoyed it. It was like, again, Bugs Bunny, Scooby-Doo-ish type music, and it was fantastic. But how does Merak go through this transmat beam, which I assume he has never done before, and then is surprised that he's not on the same location where he was before? Like, you just went on this, like, why do you not believe it? Why do you not believe the words that are being told to you? I hate you. I do not like Shap.
But Merak has the same thing. Like, he doesn't understand the concept of a transmat either. So clearly the Atrians just can't wrap their heads around this for whatever reason. It's weird. I want to talk about the situation on Zeos. So, firstly, what happened to all the Zeons? Did they all die in the war? Did the shadow kill them? What happened to them? There was some kind of genocide here, and it's just glossed over.
Actually, I have another question for you. What was the actual thing that they were fighting about?
It was never really said.
So we don't know why they were fighting. We don't know where the Zeons went. Were the Zeons made up from the very beginning?
No, because Shap says that they saw them before the war. They were humanoid. They traded with them. So they were there. But at some point, they were all wiped out, maybe? I mean, that's the assumption.
I think the whole source of the hostilities is that the Atrians tried to pawn off Merak onto the Zeons, and they returned him.
Sounds about right. That sounds about right. So we have this computer, Mentalis. There's a lot of beeping going on between K9 and Mentalis.
Oh my god. Jeez.
Yeah.
It's been a while. It was very prevalent in the very early seasons of Doctor Who. But man, they really like to keep very annoying noises going for a very long time.
I have a question for Julie.
Did any of the dogs get bothered?
I was going to ask, was Rumble concerned?
Rumble was upstairs when I was watching this, so Rumble was not concerned. But I was concerned.
Me too.
It was one of those very interesting things because I remember in Stones of Blood liking when the two Marinads or whatever, like when they were talking to each other. I really enjoyed that bit. But what I liked about it is they kept it short. And sometimes, like, they would be talking, and then the Doctor and Romana and all them would talk in English about something else while they're arguing. So there's something else going on. It wasn't just I'm going to sit here and watch these two robots talk to each other.
And in the Stones of Blood, the robotic communication was actually animated. You could tell when things were escalating between them. There was actually some personality to this beeping, whereas here it's just obnoxious. Anyway, the Shadow ends the war. Mentalis has been told the war's over, so with the Marshal on his way to bomb the fuck out of Zeos, Mentalis just goes, well, I'm just going to destroy everything. And that's effectively our cliffhanger, or close up on the Marshal's face, and we're into part 4.
Yeah, and the Doctor gives us a title drop.
He does, I noticed that.
And he, I believe, twice in the serial gives the line, that's the way these military minds work. I really enjoy that the story takes the Marshal and basically sidelines him for the entire story by just putting him in a time loop. For just fuck off with this guy, just put him over there, put him on the back burner. It's so funny. And going back to the beeping, I think they could have cut back on how many times I had to hear him say fire.
Yeah.
I think it's like, we got the point. They're in a loop. We got it. Let's move on.
I was going to say the same thing. I was trying to wait because that's later on in the episode.
Right.
But it was the how many times can we say fire? I didn't end up counting. I'm sorry. I should have done that.
How dare you?
I know. So what's happening with Astra? It keeps going back and forth of them putting on the little throat thingy, for lack of a better term, because obviously when she was speaking on the camera to Atrios, she was under mind control, but then they take it off so that they can interrogate her. And the way that they have her like tied up with the arms overhead and all that other stuff, that could actually seriously kill someone.
Yeah.
So maybe you don't want to hold her that way because you don't want her dead.
With the masks and the way they've got her tied up, it kind of has some BDSM vibes to it. Yes, I went there.
Did you hear some of the noises that the Shadow made? Because there was a time or two where I was like, ooh, oh no. Oh no.
I have a note on that later on.
Yeah, okay.
Not good.
I have a question about Merak. Astra is an astral projection, and he goes towards her, and he falls. What in the hell does he fall into?
Yeah, and then we get the same thing in part 5 with the Doctor.
What is that?
Or is it part 6? But yeah, we have that. I think it's part 6, but there's all of this nonsense and it doesn't quite work for me.
Okay.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I don't understand what was happening there.
I think Bob and Dave are fairly into the kind of dream realm stuff. Kind of saw it in the Three Doctors, which was them as well. So I don't know what they were going for. It doesn't quite work for me, but it seems kind of on brand for them. K9 gets lured into the trance map by a fake distress call. Come on. Another one, K9.
Right.
Again, I think this is the episode for me where it starts to fall apart.
I can see that.
I'm just going to move us on.
Yes,
because I'm
well,
getting
actually, before you do that, I have to point out what I believe was the most memorable part of the entire serial.
Fire.
And
Fire.
No, not fire. We have seen some absolutely goofy ass things in our journey through classic Doctor Who. But I have to believe that Shap yelling Merak while backpedaling with a shocked expression on his face and then falling on his back has got to be in the top 2. And that is absolutely amazing. And I died laughing while watching that. So wonderful.
First 3 parts, Shap seems like the super competent right-hand man to the maniacal Marshal. He very quickly turns into an absolute idiot.
Yes.
Very quickly.
100%.
All right. Now we can move on to the conclusion, which if we don't talk about the cliffhanger, I will say I thought it
we're talking about the cliffhanger.
Okay, then go right ahead.
So, you fool, Doctor, the key to time is mine. Ah! Seriously, this is the first time that the Shadow laughs maniacally.
And it sounds...
Like auto-tune?
It's stupid.
Yes.
It is
it
so
is.
stupid. And I do want to say, the guy who played the Shadow, one, he was a personal friend of Richard Burton.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Two, he was quite a serious Shakespearean actor, so I don't know why this is so terrible. Oh, and he also voiced Gandalf in the 1978 animated version of The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, the Rankin
So,
Bass one, right?
What was he doing here?
Wait, not Rankin Bass. Not Rankin Bass.
Oh,
Sorry.
he did the other one? Then never mind. Rankin Bass is far superior than the other one.
Yeah,
Anyway,
you're right.
moving on.
Sorry, Anthony. We just kind of got distracted by Lord of the Rings there when you brought that up.
That's fine. All right, so part 5, we have K9 being controlled by the Shadow. It's so sad to hear him having to call the Shadow Master, and he sounds really sad about it.
Again, the fact that it's done with the same piece that is done on the humans is dumb.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think this is where it really starts going. I mean, it's already started going downhill, but this is where the dialogue really starts going downhill. When the Shadow says, "And you are in the Valley of the Shadow," what the fuck were they doing?
And on top of that, the Shadow is on the, quote, planet of evil, but it's not a planet, it's a space station.
Yeah.
I guess Space Station of Evil doesn't sound as good. We could have come up with a lot better name for that. And there's other elements of the dialogue that in this part that are a bit rough, and I think this is where maybe I'm going too fast. This is where we might want to talk about Drax.
Yeah, I wanted to do like one or two things before Drax.
Okay.
Same.
Okay.
Go for it, Julie.
I'm not entirely 100% sure why the Shadow wants Romana. Maybe to use Romana against the Doctor, but that seems a little bit tenuous at best. But I find it so frustrating that he says, Astra, go get Romana. And then Astra doesn't actually have to do anything because the Doctor's just like, hey, Romana, go with Astra. There's no thing that really drives Astra to convince Romana to go. And then I do like, though, when everyone's kind of out in the passageways and missing each other, and some people are calling for the Doctor and vice versa, the music that's being played during that whole time, excellent. I really enjoyed it.
Dutter's delivering.
Dutter's delivered.
And while we are on the subject of Astra being brainwashed, hypnotized, mind control, whatever you want to say, once again, we have a scene. Now, granted, it's the Doctor, and the Doctor a lot of times likes to play his cards close to his vest, so it's understandable. But once again, we have a situation where a character is just silently staring at something. This would be Astra in the TARDIS staring at the key of time, and everyone just going around like, that's normal. That's not unusual at all. I think the Doctor probably did notice and just wanted to play dumb, which is what he usually does, but it's just humorous to me.
I definitely noticed, because by the time he talks to the Shadow, he's like, yeah, I know that Astra's under your thrall, and by the way, Romana can look after herself. Except she clearly can't, and becomes a peril monkey this episode.
Yep.
Which is such a shame that they did my girl so dirty, and I'm not surprised Mary Tam was like, peace out, bitches.
All right, Drax.
Drax. Okay, first off about Drax. What the hell? Feet? What the hell?
Short for Theta Sigma, or as you Americans would say, Theta.
What? It's just...
The fact that he's introduced halfway through the second to last episode. Dumb. I'm sorry. And then he just happens to be someone also from... No, that's too inconvenient. I don't know which way you want to go. And all of this talk around him, you have these pieces, why didn't you do anything about it, vice versa, all this other stuff. Is he good? Is he bad? I have no idea what he is, because you don't do anything to actually truly explain what's going on here other than him just being a weirdo.
His purpose is that he's just a Time Lord handyman that travels across the universe gaining jobs.
He failed at the Time Lord Academy, so he went, as he puts it, freelance, and is kind of a universal handyman who...
Do Time Lords need money?
Well, we are 2 years away from Only Fools and Horses actually broadcasting at this point, so Only Fools and Horses hit in 1981. But I will say, he reminded me of Del Boy. That's 100%. And I was like, wow, okay, this is exactly that archetype of a character.
Right.
And
I am not a Drax fan. Absolutely not. I think you could have done this whole story without him.
So here's the thing. I remember liking him as a kid. I guess I kind of liked the cheeky chappy, vibed him. Watching this with a critical mind as an adult, I was sitting there going, oh, no, this is not a good character.
I have to give props to the Shadow for one thing. And one thing only. When he basically told Romana, oh yeah, by the way, or he told the doctor, I don't remember which one, but he's like, by the way, while you guys went off and searched for all the other keys, we just sat our asses down where we knew the last key was and we were waiting for you.
Yeah.
Brilliant, actually.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, he's kind of covering all of his bases here. He's got Drax under his thumb trying to get the key to time for him without having to do mind control. He's got K9 under mind control. He's got Astra under mind control. He's got Romana, who he's threatening to kill unless the doctor gives him the key. He's kind of putting all these pieces in place to try and force the doctor's hand. I do actually like that. I think that's quite good. It's a shame about almost everything else at this point.
Yeah.
I do like the doctor's kind of rescue of K9.
Yes.
And K9 threatening Drax unless he rights him. And of course, we get the line that Riley quoted at the beginning, your silliness is noted, towards Drax. And I kind of love that as Drax is building this shrinking ray, he's trying to figure out the dimensional stabilizer. And the doctor's like, bro, it's synaptic adhesion. And K9 is like, it's synaptic adhesion. And Drax is refusing to listen to anyone, even though everyone is telling him, he's like, nah, it's the chronostat, mate. It always is. And he's an idiot.
Yes. At the end, he takes his shrink ray gun thing and he points it at the doctor. I was very confused about that. And I think the doctor seemed to be very confused about that because he's an idiot.
I actually like the idea of Drax being an idiot. It's very similar to the joke from Rick and Morty, as in that show that does a lot of trans-dimensional things. So there's many different versions of characters. And if there's a dumb Rick, and I can't help but think that Drax is the dumb Time Lord. And if they could have emphasized that more and made him dumber, I think for comedic reasons, I think I may have enjoyed him because it would have been so damn funny.
I mean, we already know he failed at the academy, so he is already the stupid Time Lord. But yeah, I think it would have been funny if they had made him.
Yeah, if they leaned into it a bit harder.
And we're into part 6 at last.
For some reason, they decided they needed to show us some more fires.
Yeah.
I'm tired of that, but okay, let's go.
Just to remember, everybody, Marshall's over there. He's going to be doing this for a while.
I know I haven't been talking about this since we've been doing this episode, but this is when the big reveal of her being the final piece. And I'm like, I figured that out in part 2, guys. It was so obvious. I don't know if it was just me or if it was really just projected so early on. And then she talks about being the 6th princess of the 6th dynasty of the 6th royal house. And she said that multiple times. And the amount of time it took Romana to actually figure it out, I was like, come on, Romana. She just said it. It's so obvious. But it is what it is. I get it.
It's not great.
Oh, just on an offshoot here, was anyone surprised that Shap was alive? I thought he was dead.
I thought both Shap and Merak were dead.
Yeah.
Thought or hoped?
Yes.
Yeah, really.
So this whole time with Astra being the key and she was going to disappear, I was like, I hope Merak at least gets to say goodbye. No. She disappears and he comes in and she's already gone. And I'm like, I didn't get my final TV novella scene. So I'm very sad about that. And then obviously that all changes when we get to the actual end, which is dumb.
Let's talk about the culmination. So firstly, the Shadow raving on about apotheosis. Fucking hell. Again, we talked about the dialogue being pretty good in the first 3 episodes, and at some point it just goes off the cliff. I don't know if Bob and Dave were fighting like hell at this point, so they stopped caring, or if they were under a time crunch. I don't know what went wrong here, but the dialogue gets real bad. Equally, the moment when Astra touches the tracer and becomes the final segment, the Shadow definitely has an orgasm face.
Yeah. The reaction there, I think the directors should have been like, okay, we're going to do a couple different takes on this, take some different approaches on this, so maybe react a little bit differently, because that was uncomfortable.
We did not need to see the Shadow's cum face.
If we could have had maybe a cutaway to 2 of the mutes looking at each other awkwardly, that would have been pretty good.
That would have been amazing.
One more thing about the Shadow. I was liking the Shadow. I thought he was really cool looking. And as you mentioned earlier, he seems pretty sharp. He's pretty intelligent. But then I kind of lost all threat for him when he couldn't enter the TARDIS because, oh no, there's light. Really? We're going to make light the thing that can stop the shadow?
Blinded by the light. You know, it's
right.
fine.
It's a low bar, man. That's a pretty low bar. Oh no, the shadow's coming. What should I do? Shine a flashlight at him. Done now. No problem.
We could have settled this much earlier if the Doctor just got that from the TARDIS. Yeah.
And it doesn't even have a point. It's not even played into later. It's not even important. Why?
Right. So Astra becomes the key, or the final segment to the key, and that's effectively where we're wrapping things up, or heading towards wrapping the entire season up. And this all starts to, I don't know. I
hate it. I hate it. There's no other term for this.
The one element I like is Romana's crisis of conscience over Astra being the key and letting Merak run around the station or wherever he is. And she is so angry at the Doctor and how nonchalant he is. I like that. That bit is good. Everything else, I'll walk it back a little bit. I like the Marshal. When he finally gets to fire, he has a delightfully insane grin, and the phrase, beautiful mushrooms will blossom and burst. That feels very, I don't know, Doctor Strangelove to me.
Yeah, General Ripper.
That was some really good dialogue.
Yes.
But the Doctor's turn of being crazy, or pretending to be crazy to mess around.
Dumb. The Black Guardian pretending to be the White Guardian.
I know that they were different actors between the Reboss operation and here, so he did look different, but I'm going to devil's advocate this a little bit.
I guess that's my question. So when he was changing from dark to light and all that stuff, and so my first thought was, is the Guardian is both white and dark. But then things were happening in the way that they went. I was like, is he just pretending to be the white one, or is he actually both?
My question on this was there ever a White Guardian?
Yeah.
Because the way this happens is the Doctor doesn't do anything with the key. So all the waffle in the Reboss operation about needing to bring balance back to the universe, that doesn't happen. We see the Doctor break the tracer, the segments disperse without having done anything. And yet, after this, a little bit of a spoiler, but the universe is perfectly okay. So, was there ever a White Guardian? Was this just the Black Guardian going, well, I want the key, let's send the Doctor on a mission?
Let me ask you this. If in the Rebus operation, the White Guardian is actually the Black Guardian trying to get the Doctor to do all this work for him, then that would mean that Romana was brought in by the Black Guardian.
Yeah, it would.
Which I would like to get a little bit more detail as to how that worked. I guess she was fooled like the Doctor was fooled?
Well, if you remember at the beginning, Romana thought it was the President of the Time Lords, not the White Guardian. She didn't find out that it was the White Guardian until the Stones of Blood.
So the Black Guardian's just sending out a wanted ad in the Gallifrey newspaper looking for assistant Time Lord or lady, please reply.
I guess so.
But basically what I get out of this is that really the only thing that this season does is brings the Doctor and Romana together. Everything else doesn't matter.
That's about it, really.
Cool.
Yeah.
And they've managed to upset Mary Tam, so we don't even have her after this.
Oh.
There's that.
Can we be done?
Yeah, I do have one final question. When the segments disperse, we see Astra appearing to Merak in the hospital. Does that mean that all of the segments went back to where they came from? Is Kroll once again menacing that poor little moon?
And on top of that, the problem with it is that because the Black Guardian wasn't destroyed, he still exists. And the Doctor then says that they're scattered again. Well, now that the Black Guardian knows all the locations, what's stopping the Guardian from just doing it himself?
I don't know that they're back in the same locations, though.
So only one goes back to
because she was a human being.
Okay.
And
all right.
maybe because it was the closest one as well.
All right. Okay.
You can headcanon that.
I guess.
It does feel like a little bit of a gap to some extent. All right. We're done with this wholly unsatisfying end to the entire Key to Time saga. Let's go ahead and rate this.
Okay.
Because, well, before we rate it, very quickly, no quarries, no jelly babies, camp count, guys, anything?
No.
I mean, I feel like the Shadow deserves a couple of points for his inane laughter.
And his orgasms, yeah.
Yeah. All right, 2 points on the camp count. Let's rate it. Julie, you're up first.
Oh, crap. Okay. If it wasn't obvious, everyone, I did not like this. I think that the bones of it could have had some interesting things done with it. I think that it starts off stronger than it ends. And that's from a dialogue, that's from a plot perspective, right? I do think that the music is really well done, and I think the direction is really well done. I think that for the most part, some of the acting is good. It's hard to do anything with a sickly in love person who is just completely incompetent at life. So I can't say whether he's good or bad at his job. This is rough because I don't want to be mean, but I'm going to probably be mean. I don't know. I'm going to give it 4.5. They done my dog wrong out of 10.
Riley, what have you got?
This serial just feels like standard Feral that we've seen on the show several times before. I'm not seeing anything novel. It's a standard action plot with a stock villain. The shadow does look cool, I mentioned that, but there really isn't anything that stands out to me in this. So it's very just by the numbers. It's executed decently, but for particularly a season finale, it just falls flat. Luckily, the Doctor's in a playful mood, so that makes it a little bit easier to watch. And it is, for a 6-parter, decent pace. You don't feel bored necessarily. You're just kind of upset with some of the choices they made. So definitely could have been better. And it could have been worse. So I'm kind of coming in between here. So I'm going to give it 6 fire. Okay, you get the picture. Out of 10.
Wow. All right. I think my first question, and I said it at the beginning, if they wanted a safe pair of hands to wrap this up, why did they give it to the Bristol Boys? They had Robert Holmes write 2 serials, the opener and then the penultimate one. Why did they not give potentially the ultimate safe pair of hands the finale instead of the 5th story? That makes no sense to me. And then what you pay for, candidly, is what you get. So we get a pretty typical Bristol Boys mess. It was overambitious. They had to scale parts of it back. The storyline is a little overblown. Conflicting pieces that don't really jive well together. Characters that are inconsistent. You can kind of tell there was some behind-the-scenes stuff going on here. Not just with that, but the change of script editors coming in. It feels like maybe Anthony Reid half-assed what he was doing and Douglas Adams wasn't quite there yet to really step up, even though he was trailing Anthony Reid at this point. So from a script and storyline perspective, this is a mess. I do think from a design perspective, it's good. I really like how both Zeos and Atrios look. I really like the costumes, including the Marshal's disco uniform.
Yeah.
And the Shadow's mask. I think all of that looks really cool. And I do also, in all honesty, kind of like the first few episodes. And it just, as I've said, it goes off a cliff after part 3. And then the bad. Firstly, Merak. We've all complained repeatedly about Merak. The Shadow becoming Dr. Evil and laughing ridiculously at the camera periodically. Ugh. And it's just so unsatisfying as an end to the whole key to time thing. Some good acting, but it doesn't really save it for me. I think this one for me is 5 farewells to the Bristol Boys out of 10, which gives us a story average of 5.17. And a little bit of a spoiler for our retrospective, that does make it our lowest rated story of the season, which I would say probably no one is surprised by. All right, with that brings us to the end of the episode. We will be back next time round with our season 16 retrospective, so you will get to hear everything. Our ratings, what we thought was good, what we thought wasn't good, our metric final count, our questions from our friends on social media. Tune in to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly of season 16. But until then, as always, thank you so very much for listening in, and of course, have a good one. You have been listening to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension with Riley Schreck, Julie Philippek, and myself, Anthony Williams. This episode, The Skull Means Nothing, was recorded on Sunday the 23rd of June 2024. If this is your first time listening into the show, all of our previous episodes are available wherever you like to get your podcasts. You can interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Watchers4D, and you can also email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, please do subscribe and consider leaving us a review or rating on your favorite podcasting app. All of those things really do help the show. And always remember, if you're looking for a safe pair of hands to write something, make sure you give it to an actual safe pair of hands and not the Bristol Boys.